Welcome to Malpractice Podcast.
Hi there. Are you ready to get started?
I was like, is it going to be me? Who is it? Who is it?
I think it's me. I don't know. Honestly, we're just
It's us.
freewheeling everything.
I'm Jess.
I'm Sydney.
Uh-huh.
And this is Malpractice Podcast.
Malpractice in the morning.
Oh, yeah. It's morning time. We love a morning recording.
We
We're
do.
caffeinated. We're vaccinated. We're ready to party.
We are. We are. We believe in science. Thank you, science.
Speaking of which, this is a smooth transition that I did not plan. Did you know that after you get attacked by a catfish, you have to get a tetanus booster? Because catfish can
Tell me
carry...
about your finger.
Okay. So my finger is like...
It's swollen.
Look how big it is. It's very swollen.
Correct.
This weekend, I know anyone who has heard me speak is going to be surprised by this. I love fishing.
Sydney is a horse girl.
I'm an outdoorsy girl. Yeah.
They live on a little lakey lake.
So...
Her family. It's so cute.
It's true. So this weekend, we went to the beach with my parents. And we were fishing. Eric and I were fishing with my dad.
Which, jelly, because I love Eric and your dad. And you.
But you hate fishing.
Yeah.
That's the trade-off.
That shit is boring as fuck. But, like, good for you.
I will say, I caught a 4-foot shark.
Okay, bitch. Absolutely not. Have I not been sending you
Yeah,
the TikToks about sharks?
you have.
Absolutely never. Catching a shark?
You know I love a shark, though.
You do.
I love a shark.
Swims with sharks.
But I also caught a catfish.
Yeah, on your finger.
And I went to let this catfish go, like, off of the hook. And it flipped around. And for anyone who doesn't know a lot about catfish,
So me.
their fin has a sharp barb.
Why?
And it stabbed me right there in my finger.
Why does it have a sharp... I thought a fish was supposed to be, like, nonchalant.
For, like, self-defense, I guess, because that motherfucker flipped around and stung me so bad. So the barb stabs you.
Okay.
Like, it goes into your skin.
Oh, my God.
And it has venom on it.
Venom?
Yes.
Catfish?
Yes.
Oh, you are blowing my freaking mind. And I'm not kidding.
It sounds like I'm exaggerating. This was the most painful thing I've ever been through.
It doesn't sound... A venomous catfish monster attacked you, is what I just heard.
Yes, that's what you heard. It's correct.
It attacked you more than the 4-foot shark?
Yes, the shark was like, I'm chill, just set me free. And I was like, all right, bro. The catfish was like, absolutely not, and stung the shit out of me.
I did not know catfish can sting you.
Yeah, my finger's still numb. It hurt so bad when it happened. Oh, I just started bleeding everywhere. Blood everywhere. Number one, because it stabbed me. And number two, it hurt so bad I almost threw up.
Well, Sydney, of course you did. A venomous catfish monster attacked you.
You're like so reasonable about this.
Of course you almost threw up. I would have burned Utica to the ground.
I lost my mind. I was like, let's go home. I don't want to be here anymore.
Let's go home from the beach.
Let's forever.
Let's go home from...
I've never experienced something like that.
Who'd have thought catfish were predators?
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
And they preyed on me. I was the victim.
They did. Sydney, oh my... And you were going to release it?
Yeah. I was trying to release it.
Motherfucker.
And it got me.
Did you kill it after that?
No. I let it go still.
Oh, that would not have been me.
But then Eric caught a catfish and I was like, can you just bop that one like just a little? Just like a revenge smack on the deck. Just like drop it.
I would have slapped that catfish across the fucking face if I had been there and it had stabbed you.
I was just in shock, honestly. I didn't have time to react.
Sydney, are you well? Should we cancel this week's recording?
I have PTSD from this catfish.
Go lay down immediately and get this girl a cookie.
I took a 2-hour nap yesterday, so I'm okay.
Well, I hate fishing before this story, and now I am a fan of fishing because all catfish must be punished. Total revenge.
You're on an anti-catfish campaign, and I
100%.
love it. I appreciate it.
Also, I'm going to go buy catfish today. Just
Jess is a vegetarian.
nom nom, bitch. Having some tacos.
I'm telling you, shook. Shook to my core. Catfish tacos sound delicious. I would eat one.
I don't even know what they look like, to be honest.
They're slimy. They're really slimy. And they have whiskers.
And how did you catch a shark?
With just like a minnow on the end of my...
And a fucking shark? You said 4 feet?
Yeah.
I was fucking 4 feet all of middle school. You basically caught middle school me. You're welcome.
I did.
I'm so terrified. So when you catch a shark, what happens?
You just let it go.
How does one let go of a shark from the line?
So they have like a hook. You just pull the hook out.
You pull the hook out of a shark's mouth?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here right now.
Yeah.
I think for me it'd be a lip ring for that motherfucker for the rest of life. I'm
Snip.
chopping it. Yeah. Yeah.
If it's like a crazy shark, maybe you do that.
Okay, what is... Excuse me. What is not a crazy shark?
I don't know. He was chill. He was like, what's up?
What kind of shark was it? Do you know?
It was a black tip.
Of course you know. This is a test of your shark freakness. Of course you know the type of shark. Do you know what I don't know? What the fuck black tip shark is? I know hammerhead.
Yeah.
And great white.
Sure, those are the big ones.
And I only know a great white is big and white.
That's pretty much all you need to know. If you see a great white, I feel like you're not having a good time. That would be my assessment.
If you see a great white, that's the end of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you right now.
I'll have a heart attack before it even comes close to me.
I won't even go in the fucking ocean, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I will go to
like
my
tippy
waist.
Toes, yeah.
I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
Doesn't feel like it's worth it.
There's some sharks in here, and I cannot. We need to get into this episode.
Let's do it. Okay, y'all. So this week we are sharing the story of a dude who is just the absolute worst of the worst. Gonna cut to the chase.
Take our word for it before we get into it. This guy sucks.
Billy Kipkorir Chemirmir is a convicted murderer in Dallas, Texas. So right here in our home state, another medical serial killer. We can't seem to figure out why there are so many medical serial killers here in Texas. Does anyone have suggestions? Jess, what do you think?
Well, I have several thoughts. Texas is big.
It is big.
So there's a lot of space.
Yeah.
And then there is a feeling in Texas that people just do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people misunderstand.
Correct. I think I agree with you.
If you get the chance to do something good for Texas, please do it, because we have a lot of people to work against here.
We're struggling sometimes.
Please be a good person.
Yeah.
So spoiler alert from the get-go, convicted murderer. He is trash, and he comes as a listener recommendation thanks to friend of the pod, Grant Howarth. Shout out to you, Grant, for bringing this up to us. Hope you are listening and enjoying this episode.
Yeah. So let's talk about Billy. He was born in a Kenyan suburb to a wealthy farmer who was apparently the long-standing village chief. He started working while in Kenya as a caregiver and then immigrated to the U.S., landing himself in Dallas, working at assisted living / independent living communities, like retirement communities, basically. I think based on his documentation that he got permanent residency either in 2007 or 2008. Also, this is a really messed up story. Let's say that.
Yeah, from the get.
It's also pretty difficult to figure out after 2008. Between 2008 and 2016, it's difficult to figure out exactly what Billy was doing, but we do know that apparently in both 2010 and 2011, he was arrested and charged with 2 separate DUIs, which, if you're not familiar with that term, it stands for driving under the influence offenses. So both of those resulted in short custodial jail sentences and multiple fines. We also know that in July of 2012, he was arrested for a domestic violence episode where he assaulted his then girlfriend. So, just starting down a path of like not doing great here. And those charges are awful.
Yeah.
But it only appears to get worse from there because in June of 2016, Billy gets charged for the first time with trespassing at Edgemere Retirement Community, to which he pleaded no contest.
Yeah.
Basically, no contest means I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to say that I'm guilty, but I'm not going to fight it.
You say, meh.
When you're guilty.
Okay.
It's like you have the evidence to find me guilty is basically what no contest means.
Right. It's not something you should be pleading in like trespassing.
It doesn't look good. So,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it only gets worse from there because as it turns out, it seems like he was hit with these trespassing charges while he was in the process of scouting for victims, and he had possibly already committed his first murders at that point.
Yeah. He's stupid. So I wanted to mention too, the reason like we're covering him for this podcast is because he was a carer at one of these assisted living or like senior living homes, and those people provide help getting dressed. They could also provide help doing providing medicines, taking care of people essentially. So it's supposed to be a really safe place for you to essentially trust your elderly relatives there, right? You entrust these people, like my grandparents, they had in-home caregivers. There's so much trust there because your elderly relatives can't do much to protect themselves.
Right.
So these positions are like so important. I know you have similar like family members who you've entrusted into those spaces, and most of them are great people. Like my mom's dad was taken so good care of at his assisted living, and they had to do everything for him, and he really cared about them, and they, you know, it's just most of them are not this way, obviously.
Right. But it's definitely, I agree. We're covering it because he was a medical caregiver, which, you know, but also because I totally agree with you that he was placed in such a position of trust, which anybody that you put in charge of your health is placed in a position of trust.
Right. We've talked about that before.
Yes. This is like for the most vulnerable populations. He's in a position of trust, and he essentially used his position as a caregiver
to be a dick.
To scout victims. That's all there is.
Yeah.
So let's get into that because it's messed up, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. So let's talk about exactly what Billy was doing at the Edgemar senior living apartments in Dallas, Texas. He'd been caught there twice using a fake name and claiming to be a healthcare employee. Or using that fake name to gain access to be employed and pass a background check. So he had like 2 IDs.
Yeah.
One was Billy, one was Joe Schmo. I don't know what the other one was. And he was not able to pass that. If he had applied as Billy, he would not have been able to pass the background check.
Right, because he had assault charges and DUIs. Like, they wouldn't have given him this job.
Right. In April of 2016, he was stopped and charged with trespassing at the residence, and there seems to be more to that story now. Police believe that they shouldn't have just stopped at the trespassing charges because there's apparently evidence that he'd already murdered 3 women living there by that time. And we want to mention their names. Catherine Sinclair, Phyllis Payne, and Phoebe Perry were those victims, alleged victims.
Right. What police have basically accused him of doing at that point is essentially using his credentials and experience as a healthcare worker to gain access to retirement or independent living facilities. And then he would basically use that job to scout out the patients living inside those communities. And after that, he would sneak in later and pose as a maintenance worker to gain entry into the homes of the elderly patients who lived alone. And he knew those patients were living alone because he was taking care of them during the day and basically using that job to scout them out and then come back at night in disguise, essentially. And he was doing this to basically elderly patients, predominantly women, just like the 3 women that Jess mentioned, who lived alone, because all 3 of those women lived alone at the time of their deaths.
Yeah, exactly. So Billy's alias was, I said I didn't know the name, but I do. Benjamin Koitaba.
Yeah.
He had an ID for that name. So, and his alias was also charged as he would pretend to be this other person to gain access. So he would like say, my name is Benjamin. I need to check the pipes, quote unquote, to get access into their apartments. But if you're like an elderly person at this senior facility and someone comes in and says like, hey, it's a maintenance request, like you say yes. You're not going to say no.
Right.
So he was released from jail in July of 2016, which actually would send him on another spree at a place called The Tradition.
Yeah. And before we get into that, apparently, investigators didn't actually even know at the time that Catherine, Phyllis, and Phoebe had been murdered. Because of their age, all 3 had initially been listed by medical examiners in the Dallas area as natural deaths.
Right.
Because Catherine Probst Sinclair died at the age of 87 in April of 2016. which, when it was finally attributed to Billy in 2018, meant that his killing spree actually started a month earlier than police had previously believed. Then in October of 2020, a medical examiner changed Miss Sinclair's manner of death to, quote, undetermined instead of a natural cause of death. During the court proceedings, they would go on to prove that Billy's cell phone data would ping his location in the courtyard of the Edgemere retirement community in North Dallas at the exact same time as Miss Sinclair passed away. So part of the reason for that change was that her family didn't believe that her death occurred naturally. They had found blood on her pillow. Apparently, her apartment was missing a large and valuable safe that they were unable to locate, so it was definitely pretty sus from the beginning. But because of their age, medical examiners basically didn't want to look into it more.
Yeah. Kind of almost like a misdiagnosis of death, right?
Yeah.
And that is why these are so vulnerable populations, because you can take advantage of them and obviously steal from them, which was, we find his MO, is like he wants to steal their stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So Miss Sinclair's family, along with the other families, began to take steps like filing police reports of suspected homicides, and they would also notice missing items, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, like we hear in so many of these cases, some families said that investigators didn't take their cases seriously from the beginning, which I understand hesitancy, but due diligence.
I mean, blood on a pillow is pretty damning and a missing safe, right?
The fact that they wouldn't take it seriously, even though his second trespassing arrest at Edgemere occurred only 2 weeks after the death of Phoebe Perry, is kind of ridiculous, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
As the murders continued, victims' families got together and they tried to advocate for change in surveillance and needs around protecting people who live at these places. They formed a group called Secure Our Seniors Safety, and the group wants new Texas laws requiring medical examiners to notify families when a relative's death certificate is amended, because sometimes those things aren't reported out.
Right.
And wanted to require spot checks by officials at cash for gold shops because of the mounting suspicions that their loved ones were being murdered for their possessions.
Yeah.
So shout out to Secure Our Senior Safety. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, and they actually, we'll talk about this later, but they do go on to get a law passed requiring medical examiners to notify families. Which,
why is that not already the practice?
Why is that not already a thing?
Well, I don't understand that.
If a medical examiner suddenly decides that your loved one's death is suspicious,
how would you not?
It's just stupid to me that that's not already the practice.
Agreed.
But we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Agreed.
So in 2016, when he was arrested for trespassing 2 weeks after Phoebe Perry's death, Billy was apparently sentenced to 70 days in a county jail, but was released for good behavior after serving only 12 days of that sentence.
What?
Right. He was in custody. I understand that hindsight is 2020, but he was behind bars. You let him out, and he went on to commit a ton of violent offenses. Okay. So 8 days later, Joyce Abramowitz, I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. She was 82, and she was murdered at the Tradition Prestonwood, which is a luxury senior living complex in Dallas. And that would be the start of an incredibly disturbing pattern where Billy would commit several murders at one senior living facility, and then when he felt like he was in danger of getting caught, simply move on to another and get a new job there.
He sucks.
Yeah, he's an absolute monster.
He is a monster, yeah.
In April of that year, Joyce had been on vacation and reported to police that while she was on vacation, several valuable pieces of jewelry had been stolen out of a jewelry box in her Tradition apartment. She was then murdered in July of 2016, and afterward, her son mentioned to police that a safe of hers was also missing from the apartment. His name was Paul Abramowitz. And he had actually been the CFO of a chain of senior living facilities. And he said, based on his experience in the industry, that the facility was at least partially to blame at that time. And he did not believe his mom's death was natural.
100%.
Yeah.
100% correct, Paul. Ultimately, many of the families would go on to accuse the facilities of failing to have security that they said they provided, which is a huge deal.
Yeah.
The next 8 murders, yeah. 8 back-to-back murders he's linked to would all take place at the same Tradition Prestonwood senior living facility. One victim, Glenna Day, she was 87, was found dead in October of 2016 right after she had told her friends that she felt that she should move because all her friends, quote, were dying off.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
That's a horrifying quote from like a future murder victim.
I know.
At the point when Glenna was murdered, he had already claimed the lives of Juanita Purdy, 82, Leah Corkin, 83, Margaret White, 86, Solomon Springs, 89, and apparently the only male victim to have been publicly identified, and Norma French, 85. After the murder of Glenna Day, he also killed Doris Gleason, 92, whose family was immediately suspicious because when they identified her body, she was missing a necklace that they said she never, ever, ever took off under any circumstances, and that was in October of 2016. And among these attacks was the same MO that Jess mentioned earlier. A man came to the door asking if there was work that needed to be done or telling people, hey, the facility sent me, I need to check some pipes, something like that, basically to gain entry into their homes. People would say yes, and then they would end up essentially murdered by him. And some of these people were in private residence, some were in apartments. Many of the residents that he would murder appeared to have been smothered with pillows, but he was very good at hiding evidence.
Yeah. One victim, Leah Corkin's daughter, her name is MJ, she noticed strange things about her mother's death, but she's so swamped with grief. So that's the other thing, is like everyone's so overwhelmed and sad. She didn't notice or really think about the strange things that were happening until later on, which really impedes investigation. Her mother was found on the floor of her living room. Her hair was messy. Makeup was on her bedroom pillow. And she had no wedding ring on, which was suspicious. And she was one of many. Like, families across a 2-year span were experiencing the same things, like missing jewelry, unexpected deaths, and then probably sitting with that for a couple months before really thinking about it and being like, wait, that is so weird. Like, that wouldn't have happened that way.
And then you also have to get investigators
to do it,
who I'm sure have a lot on their plates. I'm not going to say they don't, but then you have to get them to do something about a 90-year-old loved one's death, right?
Right.
While you're dealing with that grief, investigators are probably like, okay, you're sad, we get it, but they're 90, right?
Yeah.
So it's, oh God, honestly, it's so sickening that he would like pick this population because it's,
I know,
they're like the perfect victims and it's disgusting.
Just because he wanted to get away with it.
Yeah. Then in November of that same year, police received a report of a suspicious person walking around the Tradition Prestonwood, and that person matched Billy's description. They were caught walking around the facility in a suit, like a nice suit, with a leather briefcase telling people that he was the maintenance worker there to fix pipes. And here's my real question. Why are you wearing a suit and then also telling people you're there to do plumbing?
Probably because it was working.
You should be wearing a jumpsuit or tell people that you have some other business there. You're dumb.
Yeah, I mean, he's trash.
And apparently, so one of the surviving victims said the ruse like did not work on her. So I'm guessing that a lot of times he would wear the suit to get people to open the door. He would tell them what he was there for or whatever, and then he would force the door open.
Yeah.
Because that's what one of the survivors said happened.
That could be.
Because if you see somebody at your house in a suit, I feel like you're probably more likely to open the door than if they're dressed in like...
Not me.
Oh, I ain't opening the door for nobody.
Unless it's Tiff Treats. If it's Tiff's Treats, you gotta get me. Because
You better have that blue and white... That blue and white van, too.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't live in Texas, Tiff's Treats is a delivery service
of cookies
that will bring warm, fresh-baked cookies to your door.
Or brownies, if you're Eric.
Brownies if you're Eric. And ice cream and milk. Yeah. It's delicious.
Yeah, it's great.
Excellent business model. Okay. So apparently police contacted the facility after that police report was filed and basically told them they needed to tighten up security and possibly go door to door and check on their residents, which victims' families would later allege that they did not do.
But also, like, I mean, you know, I love to talk shit about the police. No offense, police. Full offense. But how dare the police get a report and then be like, you need to tighten up security? Aren't you, like, security of the people?
Isn't that your job?
The population, the general public?
Shouldn't you be tightening up security?
Shouldn't you come and see?
I mean...
They should have come.
I feel like it's both. They should both... The facility should have done a better job, but also the police should have started monitoring it.
Oh, 100%.
Hello?
Yes. But I know that this stuff is so easy to do. My great aunt Edna was in an Alzheimer's care facility, and people came who were not related to her and would like take her out to, they would just tell the staff that she was their family member, and they would like take her out to lunch.
That's so weird.
Have her buy them stuff.
No.
Like she would pay.
No, that's not okay.
And my grandmother like raised absolute hell.
Good.
And like took them to court. Jessie Oswald did not play a single day in her life.
Never a day in her life. That makes sense because you're named after her, and you
correct.
Also
she was
do not
like
play.
She took them to court. It was crazy.
Good, because one of the things I guess that really struck me about this case is the fact that all of his victims are just the sweetest little angel grandma types, and the fact that he was put in a position of power over them and he chose to abuse such a vulnerable population is, I think for me at least, what makes this case so disturbing and makes him so despicable.
Yeah.
So from there, Billy seems to leave almost a year-long gap before he picks up murdering elderly people again in September of 2017.
So in 2017, the murders included victims, and I'm going to name them now, Helen Lee and Marilyn Bixler at the Parkview facility in Frisco, Texas. He also broke into the home of a 93-year-old resident who told police that a well-dressed black man had come to her door and said he was a maintenance worker. And then when she said she didn't need any work done, which, bitch, same, he forced his way inside, knocked her from her walker to the floor, and tried to smother her with a pillow. What a bitch.
Yeah.
The fact that someone can describe what you did as knocking an elderly person from their walker, you're an asshole.
Yeah, agreed.
This amazing 93-year-old apparently began to pray, believing that he was going to kill her. Billy suddenly stopped the attack, stole jewelry from her apartment, and then he, left. She immediately pressed an emergency alert button, which sent caretakers and Frisco police to her, and she would go on to identify Billy in a police lineup. So, shout out.
She's a badass.
Yes.
After that attack in Parkview, where he left a surviving witness, Billy immediately moved on to the Preston Place retirement community outside of Dallas. While he was there, he killed Minnie Campbell, 84, Diane Della Hunty, 79, Mammy Del Maya, 93, and one more victim who was not named. I couldn't find that person's name anywhere, and I feel really bad, but nobody apparently reported it, so I don't know if their family wanted it
they probably
kept
don't
private.
Want it yeah.
He also went on to kill Doris Wasserman, 90, back at the Tradition. So he went back to the previous facility that he had worked at. Carolyn McPhee, 81, in her private residence in Plano, Texas. Rosemary Curtis, 75, in her private home in Dallas. And Mary Brooks, 88, at her condo in Richardson, Texas. It's a little hard to find individual stories about each of these people, but apparently Doris Wasserman, who was killed in December of 2017, had spent the afternoon before her death playing with her great-grandson on Christmas Eve. Her family dropped her off at her apartment around 3:30 p.m., so she'd been playing with her great-grandson all day. Dropped her off at 3:30. They came back around 8 p.m. and they found her lying on the bed, fully clothed and unresponsive. So her death was immediately suspicious because she'd been playing with her great-grandson for a full day. Her family dropped her off. They came back around 8, and she's dead.
And suddenly, immediately.
Right.
So, and thank you for sharing that story. I was trying to find some too, but I think people just wanted to release their family members' names and not much else. But it's always good to get victim stories like that, I think.
Agreed.
Then in March of 2018, Billy goes on to what seems to be a complete rampage. So, cool, you're a motherfucker.
Right.
On March 4th, he killed Martha Williams, who was 80. 5 days later, he killed Miriam Nelson, who was 81. And 9 days after that, he killed Ann Conklin, who was 82.
That's just though that close together, I feel is just a spree. He's going berserk.
Oh, 100. He is a serial killer.
Absolutely.
He needs to have Criminal Minds episodes after him.
In every sense of the word, he's
disgusting.
Such a piece of shit. Yeah.
One day after Ann's death, a 91-year-old woman and another complete badass, Mary Bartell, survived an assault at Preston Place, where there had been 7 deaths within a 6-month period that were connected to Billy, which is like, hello,
How many does it take? Yeah.
where's the analyst here? A man forced his way into her room and told her not to fight him as he tried to smother her. He left her for dead and took her jewelry box. However, she was revived by firefighters. Shout out to firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
I always am impressed by firefighters because
Oh, same.
absolutely not.
Amazing.
I also live with them in the Netherlands, so I
Yeah.
think they're really cool.
They are cool, yeah.
So they revived her, which was amazing, after a friend had found her and she was unresponsive and unconscious. She then Bartell provided a description that masked Billy. Eventually, she picked him out of a lineup. So again, shout out to her. She's really brave.
Yeah.
That happened. Plus, another neighbor had jotted down a suspicious license plate. And I can't say this enough. Always jot down a suspicious license plate.
Take it down quick.
Take it down quick. That he noticed.
Maybe you don't need it.
And it ended up being Billy's car. So
Yeah.
Was suspicious, can confirm. Based on what she told the authorities and the information, the police had enough to bring him in as a suspect.
So we love Mary. She's absolutely incredible, not only because she gave them enough to identify Billy as a suspect, but she also goes on to testify in the court trial against him. And we're going to play a little bit of her testimony right now.
Bartell said it began with a knock at her front door. She opened it, believing it was a friend.
I knew instantly when I saw those 2 green rubber gloves. Number 1, I should not have opened the door. Number 2, my life was in grave danger. He said, "Don't fight me, lie on the bed." So I did as he said. He just smashed a pillow down hard over my face and my chest, and I just couldn't breathe.
They tracked him to his apartment and staked it out. So it was like a real stakeout at his stupid apartment. They saw him arrive home, and then he threw something in the dumpster and goes to his apartment.
Mm-hmm.
They got him, obviously, and they looked into the dumpster, and it was a jewelry box belonging to one of the victims.
Yeah.
And he was literally found holding jewelry and cash in his hands that he had stolen.
Right.
Inside of his car, they found the same victim's house keys of the jewelry box.
Mm-hmm.
And they arrested him, and began investigating a ton of other suspicious deaths that they thought could be connected to him based on what they'd learned, and then essentially connecting the dots.
Right.
Healthy elderly family members would pass away, leaving surviving loved ones completely confused, and finally they were about to get some answers.
Yeah.
So not only were the police looking into other deaths, but family members were learning about this being a possibility, and they were starting to realize this could have been their loved one. So they were then coming to the police department please look into this death. Please
investigate this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to lose a loved one, but I feel like hearing about this and thinking that your loved one passed away peacefully and then finding out that this is a possibility, it just opens the wound all over again.
Yeah, agreed.
The jewelry box that police found saw him throw into a dumpster belonged to his last victim, which was 81-year-old Lutai Harris, who a medical examiner would go on to find had died only hours before the arrest of Billy Chemirmir.
That's crazy.
She was killed in her own home in Dallas between 4:30 and 6 p.m. on the day of his arrest. They picked him up shortly after that on March 20th, 2018, and he was arrested on capital murder charges and then held on a $1 million bail at that time. Also, this is just a quick PSA. I'm not blaming the victim. There's absolutely nothing that any of these people could have done to prevent their murders, because if you come into contact with someone who is like this, you are already in danger, period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing that you did. But he did apparently follow Miss Harris home from a Walmart. He saw her in a Walmart, scouted her out, followed her around in Walmart, and then got in his car and followed her home from Walmart, where he assaulted her in her home.
People do this so much.
Yeah.
People really do this shit.
It's absolutely horrifying, and yeah. Just be aware of your surroundings if you can. It's so hard.
And then also be be aware of other people's surroundings.
Yeah.
Especially for elderly people, if someone's creepy following them, point it out to somebody.
Yeah. Because worst case scenario.
And confront them.
Oh, yeah.
I would confront them.
Same. We probably shouldn't. We probably shouldn't give that advice, but.
I would. I would be like, what are you doing following this older lady? Get away.
Well, I just feel like the worst case scenario is that you tell someone they're being a creep, right?
And I already believe that most of the time. 95% of the time.
If I feel like you're being a creep and you're being a creep, then whatever you're doing, it's weird.
Then stop being a creep.
You need to know.
Yeah. You do need to know.
I would want to know if somebody thought I was being a creep.
I don't, but like I respect
no,
it if
I
you
really
tell
don't
me.
Yeah. I'm going to be like, oh, maybe I was a little close.
I'm so sorry.
Whatever. I'm so sorry.
I'll stop it
Right, because if you're a normal person, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea how I was coming off.
Right.
If you're a psycho killer, then you're like, oh, I need to get better at this.
Right.
Okay. 2 days later, police announced that they are combing through over 750 deaths in the Dallas area that had originally been ruled natural, but they started looking into all of them for any possible link to Billy.
And should.
In Dallas alone, our initial estimates is over 750 elderly females that we're going to go back and review those cases. We're not going to leave any stone left unturned.
They also asked for the public's help in identifying any other possible victims. So they asked anyone to come forward who had any suspicions about their loved one's death. After hearing this announcement, one victim's family member realized that they had potentially missed something. Their 82-year-old mother's death at her home was ruled a nosebleed and an aneurysm.
Yep.
And she was 82, so they didn't pursue an autopsy at the time. But after some digging, they learned that Billy was actually an at-home caretaker for their father. So he was taking care of the dad and basically, allegedly, murdered the mom while he was taking care of the dad.
Yeah, fuck this guy.
That's how police figured out that he hadn't been just stalking the elderly at retirement communities, but he had also been hunting people in private residences, using his healthcare experience as a cover. Honestly, I cannot think of anything more despicable than pretending like you are like a home health aide and stalking people as prey.
I'm telling you, my grandparents, one of their home health aides stole from them, like jewelry.
Yeah.
That was like...
Right, I remember that.
Heirlooms.
It's such a position of trust, and if you abuse it, unequivocally fuck you.
Unequivocally.
It makes me so mad. So in 2019, he was indicted on an additional 11 murder charges and held in a Dallas County jail on an $11.6 million bail. Absolutely.
Bitch, you never getting out.
Never, ever.
Never gonna get out, never gonna get out. Never gonna get out, never gonna get out.
That was your never gonna get out dance.
I was dancing, yeah.
On July 23rd, 2019, the Dallas DA's office initially announced that they would seek the death penalty in this case because this is Texas, and they said, let's do this.
He sought the death penalty for all these people. I don't believe in the death. I believe that it exists, but I don't support the death penalty. But I can understand.
I believe it exists.
I hate it when people say that. I'm like, you don't believe in it? Like, it's not real. I don't support the death penalty, but I can understand in certain circumstances why you would believe that this was the right thing to do.
I don't agree with the death penalty personally. However, if there was one guy
I understand it,
who I feel could potentially be on the right track toward getting it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Also, this is important. The DA's office took the death penalty off the table after having conversations with the victims' families, which those people are incredible.
Yeah. But honestly, if it were me, I'd be like, I don't want him to die.
Yeah.
I want him to live forever.
So he knows
in jail, in
100%
prison.
of the time what a piece of shit he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see both sides of that coin. I think that's probably partially why they took it off the table. And also, it seems like the victims' families, and I could be wrong about this, but what I heard from reading was that they were like, it doesn't
do anything.
Like, killing him doesn't bring our loved ones back.
Agreed.
So
Agreed, families.
And he did automatically face a life sentence without the possibility of parole if convicted of capital murder in Texas, because that's how it works, they can seek the death penalty if they choose to, but if they don't, the automatic life sentence is the alternative to that for a capital murder case.
We love it. Automatic life.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Over the years, the number of people that Billy has been accused of killing grows longer. The list keeps growing.
Mm-hmm.
He went on trial in November of 2021 for the murder of 81-year-old Lou Ty Harris, who was now one of the now 24 suspected victims that he's been connected with killing. Police still say that the number could be much higher. They're just like really trying to get, like we talked about before, like you nail them with what you for sure can.
Exactly.
So kill the victim, steal their jewelry, and then go sell those stolen goods at pawn shops. That's what he would do.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really sad because then family members are like, wait, didn't they have... I mean, there's just so much here it's harmful, which I have to say, unless he was like hitting a different pawn shop every time, that should also be a major red flag. Like, how many pawn shops can you go to selling jewelry that's obviously not yours?
Middle-aged, youngish man, and you're selling valuable pieces of grandma jewelry. Because, like, older lady jewelry is pretty specific.
Correct. Brooches.
I don't know. Maybe just, like, put a little red flag. Maybe go ahead and snag that security camera footage.
Right. Well, Billy is trash, and he is believed to be responsible for more murders in North Texas than anyone else ever to face prosecution. It's not a claim to fame, asshole, but it is a fact.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about a little twisteroo in the case, which I honestly cannot believe happened. In November of 2021, Billy faced a bench of 12 jurors. I don't know why, but I almost called him Philly instead of Billy.
Philly.
It makes no sense.
Fucking Billy. Philly
Billy. The prosecution told the jury during closing arguments that based on the evidence they presented, it should take them longer to pick a jury foreperson than it would take them to come to a unanimous verdict, which I love that confidence from a prosecutor.
I love that statement.
Me too. Like, just pick somebody and get it over with.
Yeah. Please pick me.
Oh, please pick Jess to be your jury foreperson. She's running for local office.
I really wish you could. I would love that.
But despite the prosecutor's confidence, that wound up not being the case. After 10 hours of deliberation and 300 pieces of evidence presented by the prosecution, one of the jurors was apparently not convinced of the prosecution's account and could not be swayed. It was a literal 11-1 deadlock, which ultimately caused a mistrial. Apparently, one of the female jurors told the others she could not be convinced and she refused to deliberate any further. Yikes.
Okay, I'll say this.
Mm-hmm.
This woman, almost like shout out to you, because you held firm and like that's what you're supposed to do.
If you really believe it, yeah.
Because 300 pieces of evidence and this man is now guilty.
Yeah.
But that's what our system is supposed to allow for.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Billy's lawyer, Kobe Warren, said. Quote, whoever that juror was, at any point where they decided the state had not met their burden, because, pause from that quote, it is on the prosecution to convince people in a capital murder case without a shadow of a doubt that this person is guilty.
Right.
Back to the quote. They were entitled to stand by that belief, and that's what they did, and I appreciate that. That's what makes the system work. And he's not wrong. I personally, having read about the trial and watched snippets of it,
yeah,
they had like no defense strategy, basically, is what everybody says. Their defense strategy was just like, well, it's circumstantial, but throwing away someone's jewelry box who was just murdered is pretty sus, right?
Yeah.
The entire time, Billy maintained his innocence. Quote, I'm a very innocent person. I was not brought up that way. I was brought up in a good family. I didn't have any problems all my life, he said. The 48-year-old also claims that some death certificates had been edited to indicate, quote, death from smothering, while they initially indicated natural causes or heart attacks. Yeah, that's what happens when you have new information. You change things. You change your opinion. So they had to actually take it to trial a second time because of the hung jury ending in a mistrial, which quite frankly was shocking and extremely disappointing to many of the victims' families because it meant they had to sit through the trial again and listen to the details of their loved ones' deaths again.
Yeah. The second trial was 5 months after the mistrial, and it started late. One juror did not show up on time, which embarrassing, and lasted about 4 days. Since the first was during the height of COVID, family members of victims weren't allowed in the courtroom during the trial. But in the second trial, they were allowed. So they were able to sit, and like I saw some family members said they chose to sit right behind him.
Right. And one of them said, I don't know how accurate this is, but probably you would feel this way if he murdered your loved one.
Yeah.
He said he personally felt that you could feel the evil radiating off of him. And I was like, that's scary.
Yeah.
He does have cold, dead shark eyes for sure.
He does. As we've discussed, they are scary.
Mm-hmm.
After day 4 of the trial, the prosecution rested, and the defense rested without calling any witnesses. Repeat of trial 1,
Mm-hmm.
but they were not as lucky this time.
One interesting thing about this case is that there's actually no DNA evidence because apparently he wore gloves every single time, which is smart and terrifying.
Yeah.
But an FBI agent testified that cell phone tower records placed Billy near the victims' homes at the time of their murders, and receipts indicated he routinely sold jewelry that specifically belonged to the victims. Like, some of these items are monogrammed and stuff.
Yeah.
You can't get around that.
Like, this is Cheryl's.
Right.
And he's like, I don't know who that is.
Right. There was also the whole police surveilling him while he threw away evidence into a trash can thing, which definitely helped the prosecution's case.
In his second trial, the jury deliberated for less than an hour. They literally went back at 3:34 p.m. and they came out, or like indicated with like turning the light on, that they'd reached a verdict at 4:13 p.m.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Same.
And they found him guilty of 1 of the about 24 suspected murders. So at this point, Billy had been indicted on 18 capital murder charges, and then he's been linked through medical reports to 6 other deaths for a total of about 24.
Which is crazy.
That's crazy, yeah. The Dallas County DA, John Cruzat, delivered the state's closing argument and held up one of the pillows used as the murder weapon and said this man was one of the worst serial killers this century and one of the worst in history. And that's on period.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't say that last part, but that's what I said.
One reporter who was in the courtroom when the verdict was read said you could see relief wash over the faces of the victim's family in the courtroom. She tweeted, "Some cried, one gave prosecutors a thumbs up." The daughter of one of the victims said, "On behalf of the many victims, we are incredibly relieved that justice is finally here."
Yeah.
In June of 2022, prosecutors in Collin County announced 4 new capital murder indictments against Billy. Those included Marilyn Brixler, Diane Delahunty, Helen Lee, and Mammy Maya. These indictments should serve as a reminder that every victim of a violent crime deserves to have their case investigated and prosecuted.
Yep.
And Collin County law enforcement and prosecutors will work every day to hold violent offenders accountable. That's Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis said that in a statement.
Good. And they should.
Agreed.
The 3 senior living spaces, the Tradition, Preston Place, and Edgemere, Edgemere.
I don't know.
They face lawsuits after the murders, of course, as they should. I mean, truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
As one family member said, Cheryl Kerr, who was the daughter of the alleged victim, Glenna Day, she told NBC of like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you think after the 3rd death there would be some flags? The 4th death? How about the 5th death? The 6th death? Like,
right.
At what point? And then Lori Delahunty, another victim's daughter, said, "We hope that these communities wake up and hold themselves accountable, that when the residents go to management and say, listen, there's a trespasser or this person doesn't look right, that they don't dismiss it anymore." And that, again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Very slight silver lining, and I mean very slight. After he was found guilty, Texas lawmakers passed something called Maryland's Law, which was named after Marilyn Bixler, who was one of Billy's victims. This was passed after a great deal of lobbying from the families of the victims. We talked a little bit about that earlier. So this law actually requires medical examiners to alert the next of kin when a cause of death is changed on a death certificate, which we talked about this. It seems so obvious to me, but I'm very glad that this is finally being changed. It's actually still unknown how many victims Chemirmir potentially has, so police in Plano, Frisco, Dallas, and Richardson, Texas, and local agencies in that area are still combing through past cases where they had an elderly resident die of unexpected or unknown causes, or even of natural causes that were maybe under a suspicious circumstance. So if you have any information on a case like this, or you have a loved one whose death you're worried about, the Plano PD actually set up a tip line, and you can call that at 972-941-5785 if you believe that a friend or loved one might be connected to this investigation in any way. So if you or a loved one were living in the Dallas area at that time and there is a suspicious death in the family or a circumstance like this that you're not sure about, you can go ahead and call that tip line. Okay, you got anything else?
That's what we know about that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for your recommendations. Thanks for listening.
If you have a recommendation like Grant, you can send us a DM at our Instagram, Malpractice Podcast, or send us an email at malpracticepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can also rate and review us if you like us.
Wherever you like to listen. And don't forget, malpractice makes perfect.
perfect.
Bye-bye.
Bye.